In the middle of a rainy afternoon on a crowded street, a thin, trembling old man was stuck between lanes of traffic, taking slow, shaky steps as he tried to cross. People grew impatient, yelling and cursing at him for getting in their way. No one stopped. No one helped, until a 6-year-old girl stepped forward, shielding him with her small body, taking his hand and guiding him across the street, despite the angry shouts around them. Then a luxury car suddenly pulled up. The girl's life was about to change when the old man's true identity was revealed. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The shout tore through the rainy afternoon like a crack of thunder. "Get out of the way, old man!" tires screeched. Horns blared. A cold wind rushed along the crosswalk as if trying to sweep the entire street clean of patience. 6-year-old Emma Sullivan froze, her tiny fingers gripping the soaked strap of her gray backpack. She'd heard shouting before, plenty of it, but never like this. Never aimed at an elderly man who looked as if a single gust of wind might knock him over. People weren't just yelling anymore. They were yelling at him. "Move it! Come on, what's wrong with you? You'll get yourself killed! Get out of the road!" The voices fired from all directions. Car windows half rolled down. Strangers leaning forward. Impatience carved into every face. No one slowed. No one stepped out. No one even wondered why the elderly man stood in the middle of the crosswalk, drenched and disoriented, clutching a cane that wobbled in his trembling hand. Emma's heart thudded painfully. The old man wasn't ignoring the cars. He simply looked lost, staring at the pavement like he couldn't quite remember where he was. Rain dripped from the brim of his worn cap. His shoulders curled forward, caving under a weight far heavier than the weather. He turned toward the shouting voices, his face etched in helpless apology. Then one driver leaned out and spat. "If you can't walk, stay off the damn road." The old man flinched, and that was it. That was the moment something inside Emma snapped open. Something brave, something fierce, something her grandmother always said lived inside her chest like a little ember waiting for the right wind. She stepped forward. "No!" she cried, her small voice surprisingly sharp. "Stop yelling at him!" The nearest driver blinked, startled to see a tiny girl with blonde braids plastered to her cheeks, standing between him and the man he'd been shouting at. Emma threw her arms out like a shield. "He's scared. Leave him alone." For a moment, just a breath, the street went quiet. Then a new wave of horns erupted. "Kid, get out of the street. Where's your mother? Somebody grab her before she gets hit." But Emma didn't budge, her soaked sneakers planted firmly on the slippery paint of the crosswalk. Her chest rose and fell in quick, determined breaths. She turned to the old man, reaching for his hand. "Come with me. I'll help you." His watery blue eyes widened, stunned, confused, and painfully grateful. His fingers, cold and shaking, curled around her tiny palm. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to cause a scene." "You didn't," she said firmly. "They're just being mean." Guiding him step by slow step, she led him through the storm of shouts and revving engines. Her heart pounded in her ears, but she kept her head high, determined as a child who didn't know yet all the ways the world failed to protect people like her, or people like him. When they finally reached the curb, a bus stop shelter stood waiting, its metal roof tinkling with rain. Emma let him sit, brushing water from his sleeve with her free hand. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "Just a bit lost." His voice cracked on the last word. Then, as if embarrassed by his own vulnerability, he dug into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded bill. "Please, take this. You helped me." Emma shook her head hard. "My grandma says we don't take money from strangers. Helping is good by itself." The man swallowed, emotion tightening his throat. For a second, he simply stared at her, really stared, like he was trying to memorize her face. "You remind me of someone I loved very much." Emma didn't understand, but she smiled, shy and soft. A moment later, tires splashed behind them. Emma turned, expecting another impatient driver, but what rolled to the curb wasn't an old bus or a rattling pickup. It was a long, gleaming black sedan. Glass dark as night, engine humming like a quiet threat, a car she'd only ever seen in movies, the kind rich people used. The door swung open soundlessly. Emma's breath caught. A man in a crisp, dark suit stepped out. Not old, not frail, but tall, polished, and intimidating. He held an umbrella that probably cost more than everything in Emma's house put together. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the old man. "Sir, the suited man said, voice smooth, trained, respectful. "Your car is ready." The old man sighed, as if the moment he'd feared had finally arrived. He tightened his grip on the cane and gave Emma a searching look, half grateful, half heartbreaking, as though he wished he could explain something but didn't know how. Emma blinked rapidly, confused. Why would a man everyone yelled at be escorted to a luxury car? Why would someone with a driver look so lost and helpless in the rain? The contrast struck her like lightning. She had helped a stranger, but she had not helped a poor man. She had helped somebody important, somebody powerful, somebody hiding more than she could imagine. "Take care, little one," he said softly. Before she could ask anything, before she could even understand the trembling awe blossoming in her chest, the suited man helped him into the sedan. The door closed with an elegant click, and the car glided away. Emma stood frozen, rain streaming down her face, her yellow backpack dangling at her feet. The street felt suddenly enormous, shadowed by a secret she couldn't name. She watched the car disappear around the corner, her heart thudding with a shock she didn't have words for. The man she saved was someone the world bowed to. Yet no one on that crosswalk had seen him, except her. She whispered to herself, why was he in the road all alone? No one answered. By the time Emma reached her grandmother's laundry shop, the open sign flickered in the window. Warm air rushed out to greet her. Dorothy Sullivan turned from the folding counter, eyes widening at Emma's drenched clothes. "Baby, what happened to you?" Emma swallowed, still trembling. "Grandma, I think I helped somebody important." Dorothy blinked. "What do you mean, important?" Emma looked toward the wet street, where the echoes of shouts still lingered. "I think he had a fancy car," she whispered, "and a man in a suit, and everybody was yelling at him until I stopped them." Her grandmother's face grew still. Cars like that didn't come to this neighborhood, not without reason, and tomorrow they would learn exactly why. Emma woke the next morning with the feeling that something had shifted in the world. Something small but unmistakable, like the way air tastes different before a storm. She blinked toward the window, where sunlight pushed its way through the thin curtains. No rain, no cold wind, just a soft Pennsylvania morning settling over the neighborhood like a warm quilt. But her chest still held the echo of yesterday, the shouting, the frightened old man, and the black sedan so shiny it looked misplaced on their cracked, uneven street. "Sweetheart," her grandmother called from the kitchen, her voice rolling warmly through the tiny house. "If you're awake, come eat before your oatmeal turns into cement." Emma slipped out of bed and padded into the kitchen. "You sleep okay?" Dorothy asked, handing her a bowl. Emma nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. Dorothy sat across from her at the small table near the window. Dusty sunlight settled on the gray streaks in her curls. She waited a beat, studying Emma the way only grandmothers could, reading the words a child couldn't quite say. "You've been quiet since yesterday," she said gently. "You want to tell me what's rolling around in that little head of yours?" Emma stared into her oatmeal. "Grandma, the man I helped, it didn't feel right." "What do you mean, didn't feel right?" "He wasn't like people said he was. Everyone was yelling, but he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just scared." Dorothy nodded slowly. "Fear doesn't care how old we are, baby. It grabs all of us the same way." "But then," Emma swallowed, "he got into a fancy car, a really fancy car, fancy like the kind in those movies Uncle Ray watches, all shiny and long." Dorothy's spoon stopped midair. "And someone helped him inside?" Emma nodded. Dorothy let out a long breath, the kind that came from deep places, the kind that carried years of careful worry. "People like that," she murmured, "don't come down here without a reason." Emma looked up. "Did I do something bad?" "What? No, baby, no." Dorothy reached across the table and cupped her chin. "You did something good, something brave. That's never bad." But her eyes clouded with a worry she didn't share. After breakfast, Emma helped wash the dishes, her small hands sliding over warm bubbles. Dorothy moved a little slower than usual, the lines on her face deeper. When they stepped outside, the crisp air carried the smell of barbecue smoke drifting from a neighbor's grill, even though it was barely 9 in the morning. Children rode bikes between potholes. Someone's radio hummed with old soul music. Life was normal, ordinary, as if yesterday never happened. But Emma couldn't shake the memory. At the laundry shop, she settled on to her usual stool behind the counter with a coloring book, while Dorothy sorted bags of clothes left overnight. The dryers hummed, the familiar heartbeat of the place. The bell above the door jingled, and Miss Hattie from next door poked her head inside. "Mornin', Dorothy," she said, her voice bright as she carried a basket of folded towels. "Mornin', sugar?" Dorothy replied. "You doing all right today?" "Oh, can't complain. The good Lord let me wake up." "That's reason enough." Miss Hattie glanced over at Emma and grinned. "Hey there, little sunshine. You keeping your grandma company?" "Yes, ma'am," Emma said politely. "Good girl." Miss Hattie set the towels on a counter. "Oh, nearly forgot. Yesterday I saw an unfamiliar car driving slow down this block. Black, long, like it didn't belong here. Did you see it too?" Dorothy froze. Emma's head snapped up. "Yes," she said before she could stop herself. "It picked up the man I helped." Miss Hattie's eyebrows shot up. "Helped?" "An old man," Emma said. "People were yelling at him. He looked scared, so I took his hand." Miss Hattie pressed a hand to her heart. "Lord have mercy. This neighborhood doesn't make room for kindness the way it used to." Then she added softly, "You did right, baby. Don't ever let grown folks' anger fool you into thinking compassion is wrong." Emma smiled a little, but Dorothy was staring at the floor. "That car," Miss Hattie continued, "looked like it belonged to someone with money. Big money." She clicked her tongue. "Makes you wonder what business they have here." Dorothy forced a smile. "Probably someone lost," Miss Hattie murmured, unconvinced. When she left, the shop felt strangely quiet. The hum of the dryers sounded louder than before. Emma leaned toward her grandmother. "Grandma, are you mad I helped him?" "Never mad," Dorothy said. "Just cautious." She hesitated before adding, "Sometimes the world doesn't know how to handle kindness coming from people who look like us." The words settled heavily. Emma didn't fully understand, but she felt the weight of them. By afternoon, the sun warmed the sidewalks, and a breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. Dorothy stepped outside to shake off a rug, and Emma followed. Even the street felt calmer today. No shouting, no honking, just the soft rumble of passing cars and the laughter of neighbors sharing gossip. But then Emma froze. At the far end of the block, a black shape turned the corner. Slow, careful, silent. Her breath caught. The same car, the same dark shine, the same tinted windows. "Grandma," she whispered. Dorothy turned, and her whole face tightened. The sedan glided toward the laundry shop, unhurried like it knew exactly where to go. Emma instinctively stepped behind her grandmother's leg. Dorothy rested a protective hand on her shoulder. The car rolled to a stop in front of them. The driver stepped out. The same man in a crisp black suit, the same unreadable expression. He adjusted his tie, then looked directly at them. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice low and professional. "I'm looking for the girl named Emma Sullivan." Dorothy stiffened. "Why?" The suited man didn't blink. "My employer wishes to speak with her." "Your employer?" "Yes, ma'am." He opened the back door of the sedan slowly, respectfully, and Emma's heart stopped. The old man from the crosswalk stepped out. No cane this time, no soaked coat, no trembling confusion. His posture straightened, his face clean-shaven, his eyes bright with purpose rather than fear. He looked too important, familiar in a way that didn't belong here. He looked at Emma with a soft smile that trembled on one side. "Hello again," he said gently. Emma didn't move. Her grandmother didn't breathe. The old man took one careful step forward. "I believe I owe you more than a thank you." Emma swallowed hard. Yesterday, she helped a stranger. Today, she realized he was no ordinary stranger at all. The world began to tilt slowly, silently, toward something neither she nor her grandmother could yet understand. Emma's world felt suddenly too big for her small body. She clung to the edge of her grandmother's apron, peeking out with one wide, uncertain eye as the old man approached. Gone was the trembling stranger who had stood helpless in the rain. Before her now was someone entirely different, someone who carried himself with a quiet, undeniable authority. His clothes were pressed and elegant. His shoes gleamed. His steps were steady, confident. Even his voice was clearer, warmer, fuller. "Hello, Emma," he said again, as if testing the sound of her name. Dorothy shifted protectively, half blocking the man's path. "Sir, with all due respect, who exactly are you?" The suited driver stood still, hands clasped behind his back, but attention in his posture suggested he was ready for anything. The old man lifted one hand gently, the gesture slow, deliberate, respectful. "Forgive the confusion yesterday." My name is Richard Whittaker. Dorothy blinked. She looked at him, then at the car, then at the driver, then back at him. Her mind ran through local news stories, rumors whispered in barber shops, names spoken with cautious awe. Finally, she exhaled one hoarse word. Whittaker. From Whittaker Holdings? Richard's smile softened, tinged with the grief of someone who had heard his own name too often in headlines. I'm afraid so. Dorothy swallowed hard. Richard Whittaker was no ordinary businessman. He was one of the wealthiest land developers in the Northeast, owner of several hospitals and a philanthropic foundation that donated millions every year. Even people who didn't follow the news knew his name. People like him did not wander alone in the rain. People like him did not tremble in traffic. And people like him certainly did not come searching for 6-year-old girls in poor neighborhoods. Why are you here? Dorothy asked, her voice steady but her grip on Emma tightening. Because your granddaughter saved me yesterday, Richard said quietly. He crouched down to Emma's eye level, moving slowly so as not to scare her. Up close, she could see that although he looked strong now, the sadness behind his eyes remained, a deep, lingering sadness, like a bruise that never healed. Child, he said gently, you didn't just help me cross the road. You helped me remember how to keep living. Emma blinked. I did? Richard nodded. More than you know. The breeze stirred his neatly combed hair. The sun glinted off the sedan behind him. I was testing something yesterday, he continued, choosing each word with care. I dress down. I walk through the city without security sometimes. I need to see the world without all the noise around my name, to see how people treat me when they don't recognize me. Dorothy's eyes narrowed. And the world yelled at you. Yes, he said with a weary smile. Except her. Richard turned to Emma again. You were the only one who saw me as a human being, not a burden, not a problem. He paused, voice softening even more. Just someone who needed help. Emma took a small breath. People were yelling at you. They shouldn't have. No, he agreed. But you stood up to them. You, this tiny, brave girl, told grown adults to stop being cruel. He shook his head as if still amazed by it. You protected me. Emma's fingers unwound from Dorothy's apron. I didn't want them to hurt you. Richard's smile was so full of gratitude it nearly broke Dorothy's composure, but she stayed firm. Sir, it's kind of you to come tell her that, truly. But she's a child, and our lives, well, they're simple lives. We don't want any trouble. Trouble is the last thing I wish for you, Richard said sincerely. I only want to thank her properly. He gestured to his driver, who approached and handed him a small envelope, thick, sealed, cream-colored, the kind of envelope that did not belong in a neighborhood like this. Dorothy raised a hand. No. Whatever that is, we can't accept money. We don't want charity. Richard shook his head. This isn't money. He held it out toward Emma, but offered it slowly, giving her grandmother time to see there was no trick to it. Emma took one small step forward, then looked up at Dorothy for permission. After a long moment, Dorothy gave a small nod. Emma reached for the envelope. Her fingers brushed the smooth paper, but before she could open it, the rumble of a pickup truck echoed down the street. A group of local men, neighbors, friends, fathers, coming back from work began to gather, watching the scene with suspicion. Everything all right, Dorothy? One called. Another eyed the sedan. Why is a car like that here? Dorothy stiffened. She didn't want rumors. She didn't want danger. Her neighborhood had survived long enough by minding its own business. We're fine, she called back, but Richard stood slowly, and the men's expressions tightened. A wealthy man, flanked by a suited driver, standing outside a modest family's business. There were too many historical ghosts wrapped in that image. One of the men stepped forward. You need any help here? It's okay, Mr. Harris, Dorothy answered quickly. Just a visitor. Mr. Harris squinted. Visitor wearing a suit in 90-degree weather. Richard didn't flinch. He gave a respectful nod. Sir, I assure you, I'm here only to thank the young lady for her kindness. Nothing more. His tone was gentle, dignified, the tone of someone used to commanding a room without raising his voice. It worked. The men relaxed slightly, enough to step back, but not enough to walk away entirely. Emma clutched the envelope, drawn to it not for what it might hold, but for the way Richard looked at her, like she mattered in a world that often treated her like a shadow. Can I open it? She whispered. Dorothy hesitated, then nodded. Emma carefully lifted the flap. Inside was a small, folded card. She opened it. Her lips parted. Her eyes widened. She looked up at Richard, confused. What does it mean? Dorothy took the card from her gently. She read it once, twice. Her breath caught. She covered her mouth with her hand. Oh, oh my Lord! Emma tugged her sleeve. Grandma, what is it? Dorothy swallowed, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Baby, this isn't money. This is... She looked at Richard, stunned. You can't be serious. He nodded. I am. Emma stared between them, her heart thumping like a tiny drum. What is it? Dorothy knelt down beside her. It's a chance, Emma. A very big chance. Richard's voice slipped in gently. It's an invitation to meet with my foundation, a program for children, for education, for the future. Emma blinked. For me? Yes, Richard said, emotion thickening his voice. Because kindness like yours deserves to be nurtured. Emma held the card to her chest, unsure how something so small could feel so heavy. The neighbors whispered, the street held its breath, and somewhere inside Emma's tiny heart, something bright began to stir. Something she didn't yet understand. Richard stepped back, offering a final gentle smile before returning to the car. I'll return tomorrow, he said, if that's all right with you. Then he and his driver disappeared into the sedan. The door closed with its quiet, luxurious click. The car pulled away, leaving a silence so strange, so expectant, that even the wind seemed to pause. Dorothy rested a trembling hand on Emma's shoulder. Baby, she whispered, the world just noticed you. Emma barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the old man's face. Yesterday, tired and shivering in the rain, today polished and important, stepping out of a car that looked too smooth, too silent, too wealthy for their broken sidewalks. She saw the envelope, the card, the look on her grandmother's face, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and something else Emma couldn't name. Hope, maybe. Or danger. In their neighborhood, those two always looked a little too similar. By morning, the sun had barely risen before Emma was already at the kitchen table, legs swinging beneath her chair, staring at the card again. She traced the embossed letters again and again with her fingertip. Whitaker Children's Initiative, Personal Invitation, Emma Sullivan. She didn't know exactly what initiative meant, but she knew it was big, because adults whispered it. They whispered big things. Dorothy moved around the kitchen slowly, stiff from yesterday's long day. Her gestures cautious, the way they always were when life suddenly changed direction. She poured coffee into her chipped mug, the one with faded peaches printed along the side, and sat across from Emma, wrapping both hands around the cup as if steadying herself. Baby, she said gently, we need to talk about Mr. Whitaker. Emma's legs stopped swinging. Did I do something wrong? No, Dorothy said quickly, reaching across and brushing a braided strand from Emma's forehead. You did something right, something beautiful. She paused. But when a man with that kind of money comes around folks like us, there's always questions. Emma frowned. He said he was going to come back today. Yes, Dorothy said, and that's what's worrying me. Just then, the front door rattled with knuckles tapping against it. 3 slow knocks, polite but firm. Dorothy froze. Emma looked up. Is that him? Dorothy didn't answer. She stood, her breath tight, and peeked through the curtains. A long black sedan was parked at the curb. Not the same one from yesterday, but another just like it. Smooth, immaculate, like it belonged on magazine pages. A second car sat behind it, and standing on the porch was the same suited driver. Mornin', ma'am, he said when Dorothy cracked open the door. Mr. Whitaker is here to speak with you and the child. Dorothy hesitated, pride and fear and caution tangled behind her eyes. But she wasn't a woman who hid from anything. She straightened her shoulders, nodded once, and opened the door fully. Richard Whitaker stepped inside. He wasn't alone. 2 men in plain suits hovered discreetly outside, clearly security, but he moved without them, stopping just shy of the living room rug, as if he didn't want to disturb anything. He carried nothing. His posture was respectful, almost gentle. Dorothy motioned toward the couch. You can sit, sir. Thank you, he murmured, though he remained standing until she sat first. A generational politeness, the kind older Americans recognized instantly. Emma peeked from behind the sofa, a mixture of curiosity and shyness. When Richard saw her, he softened. Good morning, Emma. She stepped forward, clutching the invitation with both hands. Are you here because of this? Richard nodded. Partly. And partly because I wanted to make sure you understood why I gave it to you. Dorothy narrowed her eyes slightly. I want to understand that too. Richard exhaled deeply as though preparing to peel open a part of himself he didn't share with strangers. His gaze drifted to the small family photos on the wall. The one of Emma as a toddler covered in birthday cake, the faded black and white portrait of Dorothy's parents, the cracked frame of Emma's mother in her nursing scrubs. He pointed gently to one photo. Is that your daughter? Yes, Dorothy said, working nights at the hospital. She must be a remarkable woman, Richard said softly. You've raised 2 generations of goodness here. Dorothy blinked, taken aback. Compliments rarely came wrapped in sincerity. Richard lowered himself onto the couch, elbows resting on his knees. He spoke quietly, as if telling a story he had folded into himself for years. My daughter would have been 7 this year, just a little older than Emma. His voice dipped, roughened. She had the same brave eyes, the same way of seeing people, really seeing them. Emma stepped closer, drawn by the tremble in his tone. What happened to her? She whispered. A rare illness, he answered, choosing his words carefully. We tried everything. I would have given away every building I own, every dollar in my name, if it meant saving her. Silence settled over the room, heavy, respectful, aching. She always believed kindness made the world better, Richard continued, even when she was sick, even when she knew she might not. He swallowed. Yesterday, when you took my hand, Emma, for the first time in years, I felt like I was holding hers again. Emma's eyes grew glassy. I'm sorry your little girl died. He closed his eyes for a moment. Thank you. Dorothy leaned back slowly, studying him with new understanding. She saw the truth behind his polished appearance, the grief stitched into his very bones. So what exactly do you want with my granddaughter? She asked, gently but firmly. Richard opened his eyes. I want to offer her a place in a program built to support children with bright futures who don't always get the chance they deserve. Tutoring, mentorship, healthcare support, and should she choose it, a scholarship to any school she dreams of. Dorothy's breath hitched. She masked it quickly. I'm not buying her, Richard added softly. I'm honoring her. Emma glanced at Dorothy, unsure what to feel. Grandma, is it safe? Dorothy took her time answering. Her gaze moved between Emma's trusting face and Richard's earnest, tired eyes. At last, she said, It might be, if we're careful. Richard nodded, as if expecting nothing less. I would never pressure you. The decision is yours, Miss Sullivan. He reached inside his coat and handed Dorothy a second envelope, larger, heavier. What's that? Emma asked. Information, he said. Everything about the program. No hidden conditions, no obligations, just the truth. Dorothy accepted it cautiously. Then Richard knelt, just as he had in front of Emma yesterday, lowering himself until their eyes aligned. May I ask you something, Emma? He said gently. Emma nodded. Why did you help me yesterday? The question was simple, but the answer came from somewhere deep inside her. Because people were yelling at you, she said, and you looked scared. If I was scared, I'd want someone to help me too. Richard closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed. When he opened them again, they glistened. That, he said softly, is why kindness matters, and why the world needs children like you. Outside, the neighborhood stirred awake. Neighbors sweeping porches, radios humming gospel music, someone frying bacon. Life moved on, but inside that small living room, something irreversible had begun. A bridge was forming between grief and hope, between privilege and poverty, between a billionaire who had lost everything and a little girl who still believed everyone deserved to be helped. Dorothy cleared her throat. We'll look over your papers, Mr. Whitaker, and we'll talk to Emma's mama. This kind of decision is too big to rush. Of course, Richard said, standing slowly. I'll come back this evening, if that's all right. Dorothy nodded. Evening's fine. He offered a small bow of gratitude, the kind almost no one used anymore, before stepping out the door. His security followed him to the sedan, which glided away with its quiet luxury. Emma stood at the window, pressing her fingertips to the glass as she watched it disappear. Grandma, she whispered, is my life changing? Dorothy slipped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Yes, baby, she said. I believe it is. Emma spent the afternoon with a restless energy humming beneath her skin. The kind that made her swing her legs too fast beneath the kitchen table, made her crayon snap between her fingers, made her check the window every few minutes, even though the sedan had vanished hours ago. It wasn't fear exactly. It wasn't excitement either. It was something in between, like standing on the edge of a big step, without knowing whether the ground on the other side was soft grass or a drop-off. Dorothy tried to keep the day ordinary. That was her way of keeping panic from creeping in. Ordinary meant safety. Safety meant routine. She folded laundry at her usual careful pace, humming old melodies from her childhood, songs about sunlight and victory and long roads home. But even she couldn't pretend everything was normal. Every so often she paused mid-fold, lost in thought, eyebrows pinched together as if she were trying to read a future someone else had written. Around 3 o'clock, the laundry shop filled with familiar faces, church ladies dropping off choir robes, a mechanic picking up his uniforms, a neighbor returning a borrowed hanger. Many of them had already heard rumors. Word traveled fast in close-knit communities, faster than wind, and now they looked at the Sullivan family with curiosity, sharpened by suspicion. "Dorothy, honey," Miss Gladys whispered at the counter. "I saw that fancy car out here again this morning. You in some kind of trouble?" Dorothy forced a polite smile. "No trouble, Gladys, a misunderstanding, that's all." Emma listened from her stool, coloring but not really coloring. Her ears stretched toward every adult conversation like thin pieces of thread. She could tell people were worried, or nosy, or both. She could also tell that nobody believed fancy cars ever meant good news. Then Mr. Harris, the same neighbor who had stepped forward yesterday, walked in wiping engine grease from his hands. He looked at Emma, then at Dorothy. "You sure everything's okay?" he asked softly. Dorothy nodded, but her voice lacked conviction. "We're all right." Mr. Harris lowered his voice further. "Folks with money don't visit places like ours unless they want something." Emma's grip tightened on her crayon until it cracked. "But he didn't ask for anything," she said, surprising everyone with her sudden interjection. Mr. Harris blinked. "And how do you know that, little one?" "Because he said he wanted to thank me. He was nice." Mr. Harris studied her closely, then glanced at Dorothy. "Watch yourselves. Wealthy men speak in circles. You hear one thing, they mean another." "Thank you," Dorothy said, her tone polite but distant. Mr. Harris nodded and left. The door closed with a soft jingle. Emma set down her broken crayon and looked up. "Grandma, why is everyone talking like Mr. Whitaker's a bad man?" Dorothy sighed and crouched beside her. "People in this neighborhood don't trust what they don't understand. We've lived long enough to know good intentions sometimes come with strings tied tight." "But he didn't pull any strings," Emma argued. "He was nice." Dorothy smoothed the girl's braids. "I know, baby, and maybe he truly is good, but it's my job to make sure nobody mistakes you for someone they can use. Kindness doesn't protect you from everything." Emma pressed her lips into a thin line. "But it protected him." The words hung in the air like a quiet challenge. Dorothy looked away. "Maybe, but adults make the world more complicated than it needs to be." The rest of the afternoon trudged forward. Emma's mother, Sarah, returned from her night shift at the hospital, exhausted, slumped, smelling faintly of antiseptic, and too many hours on her feet. She kissed Emma's forehead and joined Dorothy in the back room. Their hushed conversation carried through the thin walls. Emma didn't catch much, but she caught the tone, worry and awe, fighting to occupy the same space. As dusk crept in, painting the sidewalk gold, Emma stood by the window again. Her breath fogged the glass in a soft oval. "Will he come back?" she whispered to no one. Then, as if summoned by her voice, she heard it, the quiet purr of a luxury engine turning onto their street. Her heart jumped. "Grandma!" she called. Dorothy and Sarah hurried into the front room just as the sleek sedan rolled to a stop. Another matching car followed behind, parked at an angle that blocked traffic ever so subtly. A protective formation. The doors opened. 2 suited men stepped out, scanning the area. Moments later, Richard Whitaker emerged. His presence was different in the evening light. Sharper, yet gentler. He was carrying a small leather portfolio. Emma ran to the door but stopped before opening it. Glancing at her mother and grandmother for approval, Dorothy nodded once. Emma pushed the door open. The warm light from inside spilled across the porch. Richard smiled when he saw her. "Hello again, Emma." She beamed. "Hi, Mr. Whitaker." He lifted a small box. "I brought something for you. Nothing expensive, just something personal." Sarah raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "Sir, before anything happens, we need to talk." "Yes," Richard said softly. "Of course." He stepped inside at Dorothy's gesture. The air felt charged, like every breath the adults drew shaped the future in real time. They gathered in the living room. Sarah stood protectively behind Emma, hands resting on her daughter's shoulders. Dorothy sat on the couch, strong and steady as the anchor of the room. Richard remained standing. "I know this is a lot," he said, "and I know trust can't be bought or rushed, so I'd like to be honest with you about why I'm here, what my intentions are, and what I'm offering." Sarah spoke first. "Why us?" "Because your daughter reminded me of hope," Richard said, "and because I believe her life shouldn't be limited by the zip code she was born into." Sarah's jaw tightened. "And what do you want in return?" "Nothing," Richard said firmly. "Not publicity, not gratitude, not influence, nothing." He placed the leather portfolio on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were printed documents, medical coverage certificates, program outlines, tutoring schedules, psychological support plans, and emergency assistance forms. Emma didn't understand any of it, but she could feel the importance radiating off the pages. Dorothy leaned forward, glasses perched on her nose. She studied the papers like a woman who'd learned through life that every blessing came with fine print. But the fine print here was clean, transparent, generous without hooks. "Why would you do all this for a stranger?" Dorothy asked sincerely. Richard looked at Emma, his voice softened. "Because she didn't see me as a stranger." Emma blinked. "I just saw you." He smiled, a small, grateful smile that carried years of grief. "I lost my little girl," he said, "and I can't get her back, but I can honor her memory by helping another child who showed her same courage." Sarah inhaled sharply, her hand tightening around Emma's shoulder. "Sir," she said quietly, "I don't know what the right decision is. I only know I want my daughter safe." "And I want the same," Richard said, "which is why everything I'm offering is entirely optional. You may accept all of it, some of it, or none of it." The room fell silent. Then Richard knelt, lowering himself to Emma's eye level just like before. "May I show you what's in the box?" he asked her. She nodded. He opened it carefully. Inside was a small silver charm, shaped like a tiny hand holding another, simple, elegant, softly gleaming. "This belonged to my daughter," he said. "She wore it every day. And yesterday, when you took my hand, I felt like she'd given it to you herself." Emma's breath caught. "It's beautiful." Richard rose slowly. "I'll leave you all to think. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it." He walked to the door, but before stepping out, he paused and looked back at Emma. "You saved me twice," he said softly. "Yesterday, in the street, and today, in my heart." Emma smiled shyly, and for the first time in years, Richard smiled fully in return. Evening draped itself over the neighborhood in a soft, velvety blue, the kind that made porch lights glow like lanterns guiding fishermen home. Emma sat curled on the couch, feet tucked beneath her, turning the tiny silver charm over in her hands again and again. It was small, delicate, no bigger than a grape, but it carried a weight she couldn't explain. Every time the charm caught the light, she imagined the hand inside it, Richard's daughter's hand, holding another, holding his, holding hers now. Her mother and grandmother sat at the kitchen table, whispering in low, serious tones. Their voices floated in and out, as warm as the lamplight, and twice as heavy. "You think he's sincere?" Sarah asked. "I think grief changes a man," Dorothy replied, "but sincerity doesn't guarantee safety." "I know," Sarah rubbed her tired eyes. "It just feels like too much, too big, too fast." Dorothy sighed. "Baby, sometimes blessings come loud. That doesn't make them less real." Emma wasn't trying to eavesdrop, not really. But the house was small, and their hush couldn't hide the worry threading every word. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. Her mother was scared. Her grandmother was cautious, and both were trying to see daylight through a future shaped by a man they barely knew. A soft knock tapped against the doorframe. 3 knocks, slow, familiar. Emma jumped, nearly dropping the charm. "He came back?" "No," Dorothy said, standing. "That ain't him. That's a neighbor's knock." Sure enough, when Dorothy opened the door, Miss Hattie pushed inside with the confidence only longtime friends carried. "Well," she announced, voice bright, I came to check on y'all. Word is spreading faster than gossip after Sunday service. Sarah groaned. Who told people? You live in Pennsylvania, baby. Nobody has to tell anybody anything. They just know. She waddled in, sat on the arm of a chair, and fanned herself with a folded grocery flyer. Her eyes landed on Emma and softened. You okay, sweetie? Emma nodded. Mr. Whitaker gave me something. It was his daughter's. Miss Hattie's face went still. His daughter? The one that passed? Yes, ma'am. Miss Hattie pressed her lips together, fighting emotion. Then he didn't give you a gift. He gave you a piece of his heart. Sarah pulled out a chair. Miss Hattie, what do you think we should do? The older woman snorted. Baby, I'm 71. I'm too old to lie, too wise to pretend, and too tired to dance around hard truths. She leaned in. You got two choices, fear or faith, and you can't live with both sitting at the same table. Sarah sank into the chair. But if we make the wrong choice, you'll know, Miss Hattie interrupted, because blessings don't break you. They lift you. Emma watched them with big eyes, hugging the charm to her chest. Grandma, Mama, I liked him. He was sad, but he made me happy too. Sarah ran a hand through her hair, shoulders sagging beneath years of night shifts and single motherhood. Baby, life is more complicated than liking someone. But he needs help, Emma said simply. The room fell quiet. Dorothy exchanged a long glance with her daughter, one of those silent conversations mothers share with the children they've raised into adults, a conversation full of memories, warnings, hope, and love. At last, Dorothy nodded slowly. We'll meet with him tomorrow, she said. Talk things through, ask every question we got. Emma's face lit up like someone had turned on a lamp inside her chest, but Dorothy added, holding up a firm finger, we don't promise anything, we listen, that's all. Emma nodded. She could do that. Listening was easier than being brave in the middle of the street. Night settled deeper, warm and quiet. They ate simple dinners, cornbread, greens, leftover chicken. Cicadas hummed outside and porch lights blinked on across the neighborhood. Emma curled into her grandmother's lap afterward, her small body fitting perfectly in the cradle of Dorothy's old, soft arms. Grandma, Emma whispered, what if he's lonely? Dorothy kissed the top of her head. Then he's like most folks, baby. Loneliness doesn't care about money any more than fear does. Do you think he misses his little girl? Every day, every hour, Dorothy said softly. That kind of love doesn't go away. It just changes shape. Emma touched the charm again. I want him to be okay. I know you do, Dorothy whispered. They stayed there until Emma's breaths became slower, deeper, sleep tugging at her like gentle waves. But before she drifted off, the quiet night was broken by another sound, one she didn't expect. Engines, at least two of them, car doors shutting, muffled footsteps. Sarah rushed to the window. Are they here again? Dorothy shushed Emma and motioned her behind the couch. Stay low, baby. But when Sarah peeked outside, she didn't see the sleek black sedans from earlier. She saw police cruisers, two of them, lights off, engines running, officers stepping out slowly. Lord have mercy, Dorothy breathed. What now? Emma peeked around the couch, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. The officers walked toward a house across the street, the old Simmons place, boarded up for years. One officer shined a flashlight at the front door while the other murmured into his radio. Sarah exhaled shakily. Just police business, not for us. But the sense of unease lingered like fog. Emma tugged Dorothy's sleeve. Grandma, are bad things coming? Dorothy gathered her into her arms again. No, baby, she whispered, though her eyes said she wasn't entirely sure. Sometimes the world just gets noisy at night. You let the grown folks handle the noise. Minutes passed. The police left as quietly as they arrived, but the tension they stirred didn't fade. Later, when Emma lay in bed, she held the silver charm tightly, feeling its shape imprint into her palm. She thought about Richard. About his eyes, about how he looked like he had been dropped into the wrong life and didn't know how to climb back. What if I can make him smile again? She whispered into the darkness. The charm warmed slightly in her hand as if answering. She drifted into sleep with her grandmother sitting beside her, humming soft gospel, watching over her like a lighthouse. Downstairs, Sarah and Dorothy spread the papers Richard left on the table, reading every paragraph, every clause, every line. They didn't know it yet, but the decisions they made tonight would change generations. Morning crept into the house slowly, slipping through window blinds in warm gold stripes. Emma woke to the soft clatter of dishes and the low murmur of adult voices drifting from the kitchen. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, the silver charm still curled inside her palm from where she'd held it all night. Her grandmother always said children dream with their hands open, but last night, Emma's had stayed closed, clutching something she didn't want to lose. She slid out of bed and padded toward the kitchen, her feet whispering across the wood floor. Sarah and Dorothy were seated at the table, papers spread out like puzzle pieces, contracts, program details, medical forms, even a letter printed on cream paper with a gold embossed seal. They looked more tired than the night before. Sarah noticed Emma first. "Morning, sweetheart." Dorothy forced a smile. "You hungry, baby?" Emma nodded and climbed into the chair beside them. She glanced at the papers. "Is it too much?" Sarah exhaled. "It's big, bigger than anything we expected." Dorothy adjusted her glasses and touched one page lightly. "He wants to help you, Emma. Help us too in some ways. But big offers come with big decisions, and we gotta make sure they're good ones." Emma looked down at the charm. "Can we meet him again today?" "Yes," Sarah said softly. "We agreed to. And this time," Dorothy added with a steady voice, "we're going to ask every question we have. No rush, no pressure." Emma nodded. She felt a flutter of nerves, but also something warm, like courage waking up inside her chest. Outside, their street breathed into a new day. Kids on bikes, a mail truck rumbling by, the smell of biscuits from a neighbor's kitchen drifting into the air. The kind of morning that felt familiar, safe. But safety didn't last long. A faint hum carried from far down the street. Steady, low, unmistakable. Emma's heart jumped. She ran to the window. Two black sedans approached slowly, not in a hurry, but with purpose. One rolled to a stop in front of the house. The other parked beside it. "Mama," Emma whispered. "He's here." Sarah and Dorothy stood, their faces held a mix of nerves and determination. They straightened their clothes, smoothed their hair, and opened the door before the knock could come. Richard stood there, dressed more casually today. Dark jeans, a soft gray button-down, sleeves rolled up. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a father, trying hard to be gentle with a world that had hurt him. When he saw Emma, he smiled in a way that looked almost shy. "Good morning," he said. "May I come in?" Dorothy nodded. "Yes, sir." He stepped inside carrying a manila folder, though he didn't offer it right away. Instead, he looked around the small living room, the family photos, the crocheted blankets, the faded rug, and something in his gaze softened. "This is a beautiful home," he said sincerely. Sarah let out a surprised breath. People with money rarely complimented places that looked like theirs. "Thank you," she said. Emma stepped forward, charm in hand. "I kept it safe." Richard's eyes warmed. "I knew you would." They gathered in the living room again. Richard sat, but this time he looked less like a man presenting an offer and more like someone hoping to be understood. "Before we talk about anything," Dorothy said, "we want to know who you really are. Not the news stories, not the rumors. You." Richard nodded. "That's fair." He took a moment to gather his thoughts. "I grew up in Tennessee," he began. "Small house, big family. My mother worked 2 jobs. My father worked even more. I didn't have money until I was nearly 30, and even then, I didn't know how to handle it." He paused, rubbing his palms together. "When my daughter got sick, money became both a blessing and a curse. I could pay for specialists, treatments, hospitals, but none of it saved her." His voice caught. "When she died, I didn't know who I was anymore. I became a man who built big things because he couldn't save the one small thing he loved most." Silence filled the room, soft, respectful. "When I walked through the city yesterday, dressed like a stranger, I wanted to see if people treated me differently when I looked powerless." Sarah whispered. "And they did." "Yes," Richard said bitterly. "Most saw me as a nuisance, something to shove aside." His eyes shifted to Emma. "But she saw me as human. That hasn't happened to me in a very long time." Emma touched his sleeve gently. "I just didn't want you to be scared." He swallowed hard, emotion tightening his jaw. "You reminded me that kindness isn't dead in the world." Dorothy leaned forward. "What exactly do you want for Emma, Mr. Whitaker?" "I want her to have options," he said without hesitation. "Education, safety, opportunity, things children in her situation often don't get." He looked between them. I'm not here to uproot her. I'm not taking her away. I just want to support her future. He opened the folder finally and slid a document across the table. They spoke for nearly an hour. Questions, answers, fears, reassurances. The adults slowly letting their guard down. Richard slowly becoming less of a mystery and more of a man trying desperately to rebuild something lost. At the end of it, Dorothy closed the folder, looked at her daughter, then at Emma. "I think," she said slowly, "we're ready to say yes to the program." Emma gasped. "Really?" Sarah smiled through her tears. "Yes, baby." Richard let out a quiet breath of relief, his shoulders easing for the first time since he'd arrived. "Thank you," he said, voice thick. "You won't regret this." Sarah offered him her hand, the gesture of trust he had quietly hoped for. He shook it gently. Emma ran forward and hugged him without warning. Richard froze, then knelt and hugged her back. Careful, grateful, overwhelmed. "You're special," he whispered. "Don't ever forget that." When he left, evening light poured across the porch again. The sedans rolled away slowly, respectfully. Emma watched them until they vanished around the corner. Her life had just shifted, quietly, irrevocably, into a new chapter. And she wasn't afraid. For the first time in a long while, the Sullivan house woke to a feeling that could almost be called light. Not carefree, not that, but lighter, like a burden had shifted just enough for them to breathe without wincing. But the peace was fragile, because in boardrooms across the city, men in expensive suits were beginning to notice Richard Whittaker's choices, and they did not approve. 2 days later, Richard invited the Sullivans to a press conference at his foundation headquarters. "It's important," he said on the phone, his voice steady but serious. "There are people trying to twist our story. I want the world to hear the truth. From us." Dorothy agreed, though her stomach churned with worry. When they arrived at the sleek glass building downtown, reporters swarmed the entrance. Cameras flashed. Microphones jabbed toward them like weapons. Emma clung to her mother's hand, eyes wide. Inside, a large conference room had been set up. Rows of chairs, a podium, a long table at the front. Judge Martha Caldwell, a retired federal judge and longtime friend of Richard's, stood waiting. She was in her 70s. Silver hair, perfectly curled, tailored suit, deep navy blue. Her posture was straight, almost regal. When she spotted Emma, her eyes softened instantly. "Hello, sweetheart," she said warmly, kneeling down. "You must be the young lady causing all this commotion." Emma's eyes went wide. "Am I in trouble?" Martha laughed gently. "No, sweetheart. You're in the middle of something grown-ups couldn't handle without you." Richard sighed. "She has a gift." "I can see that," Martha replied, studying the girl's face with the quiet intensity of someone who had spent her life reading people for truth. After a moment, she stood and motioned toward the room. "Come. We have much to discuss." The doors opened. Reporters poured in. Cameras lifted. Lights flickered on. The air thickened with expectation and danger. Richard looked down at Emma. She squeezed his hand. "You're brave," he whispered. "You taught me," she whispered back. The room settled. Martha stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice powerful and crisp. "Let's begin." Martha Caldwell commanded the room the way she once commanded courtrooms, with quiet authority and unshakable conviction. "Yesterday," she began, "a young girl named Emma Sullivan displayed an act of kindness, a simple act that, in a more moral world, would require no explanation." Emma sat between Sarah and Dorothy at the long table, her small feet dangling above the floor. Martha gestured toward the child gently. "This little girl, 6 years old, saw a man in need and helped him cross the street. She didn't know who he was. She didn't care. She responded with compassion." A ripple of uneasy silence traveled through the reporters. "This man," Martha said, laying a hand on Richard's shoulder, "was Richard Whittaker. Yes, the billionaire philanthropist. Yes, the man behind the Whittaker Foundation. But at that moment, he was just a grieving father, alone on a sidewalk, struggling with memories far heavier than the bag he carried." Richard bowed his head briefly, eyes wet but steady. Martha's tone sharpened. "Certain individuals, motivated by politics, greed, and their own insecurities, are attempting to twist this encounter into something sinister." She let that sink in, then added, "We will not allow that." Reporters exchanged glances. Pens scribbled. One man leaned forward to whisper something to the woman beside him. Martha stepped back. "Mr. Whittaker will speak now." Richard approached the podium. He paused, looking out over the sea of lenses and expectant eyes. He spoke softly, but his voice carried. "Thank you, Judge Caldwell." He drew a breath, letting the weight of the moment fill him. 2 days ago, I was walking alone through Philadelphia. I wasn't dressed like someone wealthy. I wasn't surrounded by security. I wasn't recognizable. I was simply an older man having a difficult morning, overwhelmed by memories of my daughter. Emma touched her charm, heart twisting. I tripped stepping off the curb. Cars rushed past me. Dozens of people ignored me, except one. He turned toward Emma with a tenderness that silenced even the loudest cameras. She offered her hand. She offered her heart. Emma smiled shyly. "Her family did not ask for money," Richard continued. "They did not ask for favors. They asked for nothing, because they didn't know who I was." He turned back to the reporters. "I chose to help them afterward because kindness deserves reinforcement, not punishment." A reporter raised a hand. "Mr. Whitaker, what do you say about allegations that you are using this child to—" "No." Richard's interruption was quiet, but absolute. "I will not let you finish that sentence." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. "I will not entertain accusations built on the fantasies of power-hungry men afraid of losing control. I am helping this family for one reason only, because helping them is the right thing to do." Click, click, click. Cameras captured every syllable. "And if certain board members or donors feel threatened by the idea of compassion extended to a child from a working-class neighborhood, then I welcome their outrage." Now the room stirred, really stirred. Martha smiled behind him, the smile of a judge who loved watching justice find its voice. A reporter stood abruptly. "What about the leaked photos? Sources say you visited this child's home multiple times." Richard nodded calmly. "Correct, I did. I visited the Sullivans to provide transparency, to answer their questions, to offer support, only after they accepted it on their own terms. I visited because trust is earned, not demanded." "And what about claims that you're emotionally projecting your late daughter onto this child?" Another reporter called out. You could hear Sarah's sharp inhale. Dorothy's jaw tightened, her hands curling into fists. Emma looked at Richard, eyes wide and searching. Richard didn't waver. "Grief teaches you many things," he said gently. "One of them is this: no one can replace your child. No one." A hush fell over the room. Even the cameras seemed to slow. What Emma did, Richard's voice wavered just slightly, was offer a small piece of comfort. Not replacement, not projection, comfort. And every child deserves the opportunity to offer goodness without adults twisting it into something ugly. He rested one hand on the podium. "Now Judge Caldwell and I will take select questions. Emma will not be answering anything today. She is 6. She is here because she deserves to be seen as a person, not as a pawn." Sarah and Dorothy exchanged looks of proud disbelief. The first questions began. Hard ones, ugly ones, loaded ones. Each time, Martha or Richard dismantled them with calm precision, truth slicing through deceit like a clean blade. And beneath the table, Emma reached for Dorothy's hand. The older woman squeezed back, whispering softly, "You're all right, baby. You're all right." Outside, the sky had darkened. Clouds gathered low and heavy, and from the street, an elderly woman named Loretta Simmons stood at the curb, watching the building with deep, knowing eyes, like a guardian angel who didn't bother hiding her wings anymore. Then, from the opposite side of the street, another car pulled up. Not dark, not tinted. This one was sleek, silver, government plates. A figure stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, suit impeccable, expression unreadable. He walked toward the entrance of the center, slowly, calmly, like a man approaching a battlefield he'd been asked to judge. Loretta whispered under her breath, "So it begins." Inside, the press briefing continued. Emma leaned her head against her mother's shoulder, unaware that a new chapter of trouble had just arrived, unaware that the man stepping out of that silver car was not here to help. He was here to assess, to question, to choose sides, and some sides had sharper teeth than others. The man from the silver government-plated car entered the Whitaker Foundation headquarters with a presence that created its own gravity. Conversations faltered. Reporters instinctively lowered their voices. Even Judge Caldwell's eyes sharpened, recognizing authority when it walked through a door. He approached the press briefing slowly, like a surgeon approaching an operating table. Methodical, calm, dangerous. Richard saw him first. His face tightened, not in fear, in recognition. "Agent Rowe," he murmured under his breath. Sarah glanced sharply at Dorothy. "Who's that?" "A federal oversight officer," Richard said softly. "One of the government-appointed evaluators for large foundations like mine." Dorothy frowned. "That mean he's the good guy?" Richard hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. Agent Rowe stepped forward, expression unreadable, posture straight as a ruler. He stopped just short of the podium. Cameras swerved toward him instinctively. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, voice low, smooth, and cutting. "A word." Richard nodded to Martha and stepped aside. They walked toward the edge of the room, past the wall of microphones, to a quieter corner where only muffled echoes reached. Emma watched them anxiously. She couldn't hear the words, but she could see everything. Richard's tense shoulders, Agent Rowe's unblinking stare. The two men stood like opposing currents in a river, steady, powerful, inevitable. Martha touched Emma's shoulder. "He'll be all right, baby." But Emma's little heart didn't believe it. Meanwhile, outside the room, Loretta Simmons stood guard on the sidewalk like a sentry carved out of gospel and grit. Shadows shifted in the street. Cars passed. Neighbors peeked from porches. But Loretta's eyes never left the building. She hummed something soft, an old hymn, maybe older than her bones. Her voice floated across the street like a promise. "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." Inside, Agent Rowe finally spoke loud enough for those closest to hear. "I've received several complaints," he said. "Concerns about your recent actions, the expansion proposal, and now this." He gestured toward the press room. "This child, this spectacle." Richard didn't flinch. "This is not a spectacle, Agent Rowe. This is the truth." Rowe raised an eyebrow. "Optics matter. And right now, your optics are destabilizing." Judge Caldwell stepped forward before Richard could respond. "Destabilizing," she echoed, voice sharp as a gavel. "A 6-year-old showing compassion is destabilizing?" Rowe's eyes flicked to her. "Judge Caldwell. Agent Rowe." They stared at each other, two histories colliding. Rowe turned back to Richard. "There are board members considering a motion to freeze your authority pending investigation." Sarah gasped. Dorothy muttered, "Here we go." Richard inhaled slowly. "Investigation into what?" "Your judgment," Rowe said. "Your emotional stability, your decision-making, your—" "Humanity," Dorothy snapped quietly. Rowe shot her a cold look. Richard lifted a hand. "Leave my people out of this," Rowe continued. "You've brought unnecessary attention to a vulnerable child." Richard's voice darkened. "I protected a vulnerable child by entangling her in a scandal, by saving her from one." Rowe stepped closer. "Careful, Whitaker. One misstep and—" "Or what?" Richard asked softly. "You'll punish me for caring? For refusing to let a little girl be used as a pawn by men who fear compassion?" Silence dropped like a stone. Rowe's jaw flexed. Martha stepped up behind Richard, her presence towering. "Agent Rowe," she said evenly, "I served on the federal bench for 22 years. I recognize when an investigation is warranted and when it's weaponized." Rowe shifted his weight. "I am telling you," she continued, "what you're doing here is not oversight. It's intimidation, and intimidation toward a minor is not just unethical, it's illegal." She leaned in, voice lowering. "You're treading dangerously close to violating federal protection statutes." Rowe's lips tightened. "Think very carefully," she added, "about what you do next." Back at the table, Emma whispered to her grandmother, "Are they fighting?" Dorothy squeezed her hand gently. "They're fighting for you, baby. And for him. Is Mr. Whitaker okay?" "He's stronger than he looks," Dorothy said. "And that's saying something." Rowe stepped back from Richard and Martha, exhaling slowly through his nose. He adjusted his tie, then he spoke in a quiet, clipped tone. "This situation has escalated beyond my expectation." He paused. "I will not move forward with any motion until I have conducted a full, private review." Richard swallowed. "Meaning?" "You have time," Rowe said. "Not much, but some." Martha nodded once. "We'll use it well." Rowe turned, addressing the room. "The briefing may continue. I'll observe." He took a seat in the back, expression unreadable. Richard returned to the podium. He looked shaken, but not broken. If anything, something inside him seemed to ignite. "Thank you for your patience," he said into the microphone. Let's continue. The rest of the briefing unfolded with a strange grace. Questions, answers, clarifications. Martha shut down misleading questions with surgical precision. Richard reaffirmed his commitment. Sarah even spoke once, her voice trembling but honest. We didn't ask for any of this, but we'll stand by what's right. Cameras loved it. And when the briefing ended, applause rose from the community members gathered in the back. Real applause, not polite, not weak, real. Emma smiled for the first time in days. Richard smiled too, but the peace didn't last long. As they stepped outside, the late afternoon sun warmed the pavement. People surrounded them, neighbors, teachers, supporters. Mr. Whitaker, we stand with you. You helped our kids. Bless that little girl. Emma beamed. Richard looked humbled. Then a car door slammed down the block. Hard, everyone turned. The dark sedan, the one from the nights before, was back. A second door opened. A third. 3 men stepped out. Not reporters, not board members. Men with stiff shoulders and cold, assessing eyes. Sarah froze. Dorothy instinctively pulled Emma behind her. Richard's security team moved instantly, forming a barrier. The men walked toward them, slow and calculating. The air trembled with tension. Richard stepped forward. Enough, he said sharply. This ends now. The tallest of the men stopped a few feet away. We're here to deliver a message, he said quietly. From Mercer, Richard asked. No, the man replied. From someone who doesn't want to be named. Martha stepped beside Richard, chin raised. Say it. The man looked directly at Richard. Back away from the expansion contract, he said, or we make the girl's life uncomfortable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard's heart detonated. You threaten her, he said, voice low as thunder, and I will burn every institution you hide behind. I will flood your world with light until you control nothing, not money, not power, not fear. The man smirked. A mistake. Richard stepped closer. Security tensed but did not stop him. You came to intimidate a child, Richard said, but you've only exposed yourselves. He turned to Martha. Judge, he said loud enough for the crowd to hear, you're my witness. Martha stepped forward, voice booming. These men just issued a threat on federal property. The crowd erupted. Security surrounded the intruders. And Emma, tiny, brave Emma, stepped out from behind Dorothy. Her voice shook, but she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. You can't scare me. The men turned. Something shifted. Not in them, in the crowd. People moved closer. Neighbors, parents, teachers. Even the reporters put down their cameras. A community forming a circle. Around a child. Around a family. Around Richard. The men backed up. Not because they were afraid of Richard, but because they realized the truth. Power wasn't on their side anymore. The people were. They retreated to their sedan and drove off, tires spitting gravel. No dramatic chase. No last threat. Just retreat. Because the storm had changed direction. The storm was no longer coming for the Sullivans. The storm was coming for the men who had caused it. Later that night, with the danger past and the sun finally calming, Richard walked Emma to the porch. Are you okay? He asked softly. She nodded. Were they bad guys? Yes, he said, but bad guys lose when good people stand together. Emma held up her charm. My grandma says this keeps me safe. Richard smiled softly. Your courage keeps you safe. And you, he hesitated. Your kindness keeps me going. Emma hugged him tightly, and he hugged back. Dorothy stepped to the door. Come inside, baby. Emma lingered for one more second. Mr. Whitaker? Yes. You said storms bring new things after they break. He smiled. Yes. She whispered, what comes after this storm? He looked at her, 6 years old, brave as steel, heart pure as morning light, and answered, a better world, Emma, one you helped build. And behind them, in the shadow of dusk, Loretta Simmons watched peacefully, proudly, knowing the storm had passed. And justice, quiet, steady, undeniable, had taken root. 3 months later, Emma sat in the front row of the Whitaker Community Center's new auditorium. Around her, 20 other children laughed and painted and built things with blocks. Teachers moved between them with gentle smiles. Counselors sat nearby, ready to listen. Richard stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching with quiet pride. Dorothy approached him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You did good, Mr. Whitaker, she said, handing him one. He accepted it gratefully. We did good, Miss Sullivan. All of us. She smiled. Emma asks about you every day. Wants to know if you're eating right, if you're getting enough sleep. Richard chuckled. She worries about me more than I worry about myself. That's what good hearts do, Dorothy said. They worry for others. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Emma help a younger child tie his shoe. You know, Richard said softly, I used to think grief was something you survived, like a storm, like a fire, something you walked through and came out the other side. Dorothy nodded. And now? Now I think grief is something you carry. But kindness. He paused, voice thick. Kindness makes it lighter. Dorothy squeezed his arm. Your little girl would be proud of you. Richard closed his eyes, a single tear slipping free. I hope so. Emma looked up and waved. He waved back. And in that moment, with the sun streaming through the windows, with laughter bouncing off the walls, with a room full of children who had been given a chance they might never have had, Richard Whittaker understood something profound. Love doesn't end when we lose someone. It transforms. It finds new vessels, new hands to hold, new hearts to lift. And sometimes on a rainy afternoon in the middle of a crosswalk, it finds a 6-year-old girl brave enough to see a stranger as a human being. That was the silver promise. Not that grief would disappear, not that pain would vanish, but that kindness, once given, would echo forever. And Emma Sullivan, small, brave, unstoppable Emma, had started an echo that would ripple through generations. 5 years later, Emma stood on the stage of the Whittaker Foundation's annual gala, now 11 years old, wearing a simple blue dress. Her silver charm glinted at her throat, the same one Richard had given her all those years ago. Behind her, a slideshow played on a massive screen, children smiling, families thriving, communities rebuilding. Richard sat in the front row, older now, grayer, but somehow lighter. Beside him sat Dorothy and Sarah, dressed in their Sunday best. Emma cleared her throat and spoke into the microphone, her voice clear and strong. 5 years ago, I helped an old man cross the street. I didn't know his name. I didn't know he was rich. I just knew he was scared. The audience listened, rapt. Mr. Whittaker taught me something important that day, she continued. He taught me that kindness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. And everyone needs it. Applause began to build. So I want to say thank you. Thank you, Mr. Whittaker, for seeing me, for believing in me, for showing me that one small act can change the world. The applause grew louder. Emma smiled, shy, proud, exactly the same girl she'd always been, just taller now. And I promise, she said, her voice ringing out over the crowd, to keep helping people, to keep seeing them, to keep believing the world can be better. She paused, then added softly, because that's what your daughter would have wanted, and it's what I want too. Richard stood, tears streaming down his face, and began to clap. The room erupted. Emma stepped off the stage and ran straight to him. He caught her in his arms, holding her tight, this fierce, beautiful, unstoppable child who had saved him in more ways than one. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. You're welcome, she whispered back. And in that moment, surrounded by a community that had rallied around them, protected them, believed in them, Emma Sullivan and Richard Whittaker understood the most powerful truth of all. Love is stronger than grief. Hope is stronger than fear. And kindness, real, unshakable, fearless kindness, can move mountains, one small hand at a time.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.